Well, we weren't expecting to do a podcast a day later, but here we are. And what's funny is after the game, you messaged me and said you want to go live tomorrow, and I'm like, I can't tomorrow. Maybe let's do it on Saturday or Sunday. Jordan, we got a news. I don't think anybody was expecting. Chris Grier, longtime general manager of the Miami Dolphins, has been fired. And to give a little idea for everybody, I was working. For once I was away from my phone, away from my
That's
computer.
always how it goes, Brett. That's
And
every time you put your phone down or you walk away or you get a call that you have to take. That's always when the news drops.
And it's funny. I changed my message. So my ringtone is the song "Unshattered" by Linkin Park, and I just hear it going off, and I just get a message. It's like, dude, Discord now, and I just see like 10 notifications saying Chris Grier is fired. And yes, it is 25 years.
Do people still have ringtones for the most part?
You know, it's funny. I have everything off.
Might be one of the only people I know. Maybe you and my dad are the only people that I know that have a ringtone.
Yeah, I always kept everything off, but it's funny. My dad would complain if he called me because I have my phone on silent all the time that they can't get a hold of me because I never answer my phone.
Mr. S, can you put a poll on the Twitter, please, and just say, do you have a ringtone? Question mark. And I want to know how many people have or how many of you have an actual song as your ringtone, as opposed to just the generic ring.
Look, I just needed to listen to something to jam out to, but that's beside the point. So after a game yesterday, we don't want to go too much into the game because we all watched it. All I'm going to say is you have 5 trips inside the opponent's 35-yard line and you score 6 points. Not good enough. And as you said to me, we're a bad team. Simple as that.
And I tried to say the other day when we were on, there were 3 tiers. There's always 3 tiers. It was beating the Jets, it was beating a team like Atlanta or Carolina, and then it was beating a good football team. And with Lamar Jackson back, as we talked about the other day, the Ravens are a dangerous team. There's a reason they were sitting at 2-5 before the game and were still the favorites to win their division. And I think part of that is Pittsburgh kind of not looking as good over the last couple of weeks, but the Ravens are still a top-notch playoff team, and the Dolphins just get into this thing where when they play a good playoff team, it hasn't looked good this year.
No, it hasn't looked good against anybody for the most part. But
we'll always have the Atlanta game, my friend.
Yeah. As I told you before, and one of the reasons we decided to go live, and I'm sure the initial shock for most people has gone off, but I said this is going to be a bit of a rambling episode because there's a lot to unpack here. So I think we're just going to go down a bit, see where we get to. And I will be honest, I told people for the longest time, I do think this year Chris Grier should be fired, but I was not wasting energy on it because GMs just don't get fired midseason. They just don't. So I didn't want to waste my time and energy thinking and wishing for it during the season because there's enough to be negative about the team, and I just didn't think it was worth it. So I'm shocked. Now, I was listening to our friends at the dive bar. They had Cam Wolf on earlier. I was listening to Tom Pelissaro on the Rich Eisen show, and it does sound like if you listen, what ended up happening, Stephen Ross had a good understanding that this year's done. But Chris Grier still thought we could turn it around. And Cam Wolf mentioned on a dive bar that we were asking for outrageous packages in terms of picks for people that were up for sale. And that was one of the reasons the deal was made. Now, Little Birdie did tell me that Chris Grier's son-in-law, who has been reported is getting prepped to be involved with decision makings in the future when his wife
Stephen Ross's son-in-law.
Yeah, Stephen Ross's son-in-law. His wife
not Chris Grier's son-in-law.
Stephen Ross's son-in-law is getting ready to prep the team, and Lil Birdie told me he had a say in this move too.
I would expect he'll have a say in most big decisions moving forward.
Yep. And that's what I heard. I don't know how true it is. That's what I heard. Mike McDaniel is going to stay the coach for the rest of the season, which I kind of thought. And this is where it gets interesting. There's a narrative going on among NFL circles, and you just have to go on Twitter. You don't have to listen to podcasts. You can just go on Twitter. You go on social media. You can see this. That the growing sentiment is Mike is a good coach being held back by the roster build. I don't know how much of that is true, because one thing about Chris Grier is he defers to the head coach when it comes to roster making decisions. So I do think McDaniel deserves a bit more criticism than he's actually getting right now. But it does feel like, and I don't know how much you've seen it, it does feel like a giant weight, a black cloud has lifted off of the Dolphins.
Yes, a cloud.
So, Jordan, I told you about my reaction to news. I want to hear about yours, because I know I was just like, well, it looks like we got to do an emergency podcast.
So it's interesting because you use the words, the way the roster is constructed. And I want to break down for a second, whether it's Mike, whether it's Chris. And this conversation and what I'm about to say is not something that this is the first time we're saying, because we've been saying it since the offseason when we were scratching our heads. So you have an offense that uses 2 or 3 tight ends pretty much every play, most plays, that has resorted to needing to use Dan Brunskill as a 6th offensive lineman, because for years we have not been able to find a tight end that can really do what we need him to do in this offense. And so you haven't addressed the tight end room. You had Austin Jackson, who was already an injury concern, who it's now going to be week 10 and we haven't seen. You signed Larry Borum to back him up, who was not an NFL caliber player. Larry Borum hasn't been an NFL caliber player since the day we signed him, and we talked about that as a signing, and he cost us 7 points last night, period. Point blank. He cost us 7. Yeah. So that's the offensive side of the ball. You can get into the receivers, not having a big receiver. You can get into the running backs, but I think the running back room, other than trading up for Jalen Wright, which you trade up for a guy who's now your running back 3 and gets scratched last night and is probably going to get traded for pennies on the dollar by the time we come on here again.
Which I'm fine with.
Absolutely. But it's a testament to, you draft a player, 1 year goes by, and after you trade up for a player and don't address a position of need, because at the time running back wasn't a position of need really. Mm-hmm. And then you look a year later and now you have to trade him for nothing because you never used him because he didn't work out. On the defensive side of the ball, you can't stop the run, which
they're getting better at. They are getting better at.
They're getting better, but again, we're at the point where it's hard to get worse anyways.
It's hard to get worse.
It doesn't matter. And then we have a terrible secondary, and that's been decimated by trades, by cuts, by injuries, by everything. So you look at this team and you talk about, yes, you can ding dong, which is finally dead. You look at the way this team is constructed, and it's malpractice to keep Chris Grier. Now, the problem is that you should have done it last year. The problem is you should have done it the year before. And there are people that are saying that this is, because you did Grier, you got to do McDaniel. Because you did this, you got to do that. Just everybody remember, Chris Grier hired Adam Gase. So that's how far back we're going.
I actually believe that was a Ross decision.
Right, but what I'm saying is he was on in the staff when Adam Gase was hired, as I see that big smile that I love so much in Kevin coming into the studio.
Haven't stopped smiling. Let's be clear.
It's a party. Like it is, Brett, you said it is a cloud lifted. This is finally a step in the right direction. And we'll talk about this in a second, and I'm interested to know Kev's thoughts. In the next 4 days, in the next 5 days, Champ Kelly is going to have a decision on what to do with a lot of these guys, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Wright, and pretty much whoever else he wants on the roster that McDaniel feels is expendable. And it's going to be interesting to see how much, because like you said, it seemed like Chris Grier had unrealistic value on some of our players, which leads me to believe that we think the value is a little lower on some of those players. And it's going to be interesting to see what those players go for here in the next 4 days, because Chris Grier, I think, is the first domino to fall in what's going to be a little bit of a roster shakeup over these next 4 or 5 days.
And Kev, I'll let you get some in too, because.
But Brett, to answer your original question, it's a good day for the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
But I do want to say, and I'm sorry, but I do want to say, Chris Grier at the end of the day is a human being who has a family. So the fact that we are celebrating him being removed from the position, I don't want to speak ill will of any person, and I hope that in the next job he is successful. And I hope that with the next organization he's with, he is successful. But I think this is a step in the right direction for our organization to finally get back to winning a playoff game, which is the only thing all of us care about.
And Kev, I'll let you go in a second to talk about your reaction, because I think you were one of the first people I tagged this morning when I found the news out. So I was like, Kev's ready for this. But the thing I saw, Cam Wolf said on the dive bar, the only untouchable person at the trade deadline is HM. He doesn't think we'll trade Waddle, but he said for the right price he could be available.
I think if somebody's offering me a first-round pick for HN, I'm starting the conversation.
I need a first and a second, but yeah, it is a great day, Ozzy. So yeah, Kev, take us through your day. Like, we went to bed. It was a miserable night. A common occurrence for the Dolphins. You get the news. What went through your head and your thoughts after basically everything that's happened?
It's interesting, I think, because I kind of went to bed expecting nothing to happen, right? And I think I've been pretty firm that to some degree, the only time that they would make a change is at the end of the year, because it felt like regardless, they weren't going to make a major shift in leadership and style, whatever, at the deadline or before the deadline. And I thought that the more likely year they were going to reevaluate Grier's position, they were going to reevaluate McDaniel's position, they were going to go from there. Truthfully, I think last night sealed the deal for both parties. And whether they wanted to fire both now or wait to fire one of them, I think last night, where you had a stadium that felt primarily Ravens heavy, kind of probably sealed the deal, because the message across the board has been, if the money is affected, the change will come. Suddenly the money is affected. Look, I think I've been firm in saying that a move had to happen, that you had to do something to re-energize this fan base, to give them a boost, to give them proof that you were going to change something. Because I think the worst thing you can do is just sit on your back and go, well, we'll wait till the end of the year. Hopefully the fan base isn't mad at us. It got tiring. Like, the truth is, it got tiring. And I don't think Chris Grier is a bad person. I hate wishing guys to get fired, but to some degree, right, as consumers of the product that you are supporting, you have to do that, right? Like, to some degree, that's just kind of the nature of the beast. I think Chris Grier did some good things. I think Chris Grier did far more bad things as the general manager of the Miami Dolphins. But it's a little unexpected that it happens now, that it happens midseason, that this is the move. But the truth is, if you were going to make a move at midseason, let it be this one, because I think it's a lot easier to know what the pathway forward looks like when you don't have your general manager and you know change is coming. And I think that this is perfect because it gives Champ Kelly a chance to, at least to some degree, audition for the job over the last few weeks of this year, especially over the next 4 or 5 days. It gives him an opportunity to interview for the job, to effectively be the first candidate to get offered the job. And then it allows Ross, it allows Garfinkel, it allows the rest of that football operation side of things to reevaluate what this looks like. And it gives them something, I think, like 9 weeks to figure out what this next step looks like. And what are you going to do going forward? Because to some degree, that's the biggest question mark, I think, of all of this is, cool, you made the change. what are you going to do differently this time? Because it's one thing to just fire a guy and go from there. Now you got to make a change stylistically because whatever you were doing beforehand was not working.
And Kev, I think to your point, when you talk about Champ Kelly and you talk about us being able to figure out over the next 9 or 10 weeks what this is going to look like, you're also the first job to open up from this standpoint. So you can essentially make your board of the guys you want. And this is a little different from hiring a coach. You can really, I mean, teams are still making moves and stuff like that, but you can start putting real feelers out there and really start talking to some guys and taking a deliberate approach to figuring out which of these candidates has the best plan for the Miami Dolphins. Because I think that you can look at, and we already did name a couple weeks ago candidates and names.
And we're going to get back into that. We are going to get back into that.
Yeah, and I tweeted out about 7 names earlier this morning, but those 7 guys we can look at from the outside and say, yeah, like this guy would be good, that guy would be good, that guy, Ed Dodds has shown he could build an offensive line, Alec Hallaby has been a part of building an offensive line. Like you can look at things like that, but at the end of the day, when these guys sit down and lay out what is their actual plan for the Miami Dolphins, that's going to be the most important thing. And that's whether it's Ross or his son-in-law or Garfinkel, whoever has their hand in that. I think that figuring out who has the best plan for this team moving forward, and it also gives guys an opportunity to put those plans together, guys that want the job over the next 8 or 9 weeks, to put those plans together to present that instead of saying, before it's all talking in hypotheticals. If that job was to be open, I would be interested. If that job was to be open, I would do this or that. Now the job is open. So guys can put their plans together, interview for it, and Stephen Ross and his son-in-law can choose who is going to be the best general manager for the Miami Dolphins to build us towards winning our first Super Bowl since Dan Marino was 13 years old.
Well, Jordan, I think the other part of that, and this is to me the most important part, is it allows Stephen Ross, it allows everyone in that room to sit down and self-scout and self-evaluate what went wrong in the Chris Grier tenure so that you don't have that happen again. Because I think to some degree, if you fire Chris Grier at the end of the year, you're probably a step behind in what needs to be a seismic shift in how you operated as a front office, how you did things. Now you get a chance to sit down, and after the deadline, which will be kind of the next major thing, you'll have a couple of weeks to sit down to look at what went wrong and how you fix it. Is it going to be a more lines approach where you have effectively, they kind of have 2 general managers. They have one to handle football operations and they have one to handle the actual roster. Or are you going to do a president of football operations? Are you going to do just a traditional general manager? What's going to be the pathway forward so that when you get to the position where other people's jobs now have to be determined, and that includes Mike McDaniel, that includes Tua Tagovailoa, that includes players on the roster and players on and coaches on the coaching staff, now you have a general idea of what you want the future to look like. And I think this just allows them to get ahead of things instead of, well, kind of scrambling, going, well, we just need to figure something out. Because if you're just trying to figure something out, you're not figuring anything out, in my opinion. You're just kind of hoping that you have a solution in place. And the truth is the Dolphins operated under that belief for way too long. And that's why they spent 8 years with Chris Grier at the helm. That's why he was able to go through effectively 3 head coaches and have a decision on all 3 of them. The biggest move had to happen now because they needed to be a change in what you were going to do at the deadline. And I think embarrassment on Thursday night is just kind of the truth, is that it was the nail in the coffin for at least one party. But in my opinion, I think it may be in the nail in the coffin for both of them.
Yep. And go ahead.
I want to go back to Brett. Something Finswave posted here. What do you guys think about Louis Riddick? And Brett, you said we're talking about candidates and we're talking about this and that. I'll wait and give my opinion on Louis Riddick. And I know that we brought up that name before, but for some reason he seems to be. And I remember talking about him before we got Flores. But I'm interested in knowing your guys' opinion on Louis Riddick and that potential.
As we do that, I'm going to go ahead and bring on Coach Fuller. Welcome back, Coach.
What's going on, guys?
It's been a day. Coach, you're just joining us right now. We are getting ready to talk about Louis Riddick. Our admin, Mr. S, loves Riddick as an option. I would prefer not. I would prefer to get someone who's been working in NFL front offices currently. I'm sure Riddick can be a good GM, but I have issues bringing someone in who hasn't worked in an NFL front office in years. And I'll be honest, like, he wouldn't be my first choice. I wouldn't be against it, but I would prefer not. And I'm pretty sure Kev's no while you were talking says his feeling.
I think Louis Riddick is a good football mind. Don't get me wrong. I think that there comes a point where people, when they say they don't want Louis Riddick, you automatically think that you don't think that he's a good football mind. I think Louis Riddick knows what he's talking about. My inherent issue with hiring Louis Riddick is he hasn't been in an NFL front office in 12 years. And things have changed in 12 years. And Louis Riddick is the kind of move you make if you're going to fully tear this down, rebuild, and you want a completely fresh look at things. The truth is the Dolphins have a cap situation to navigate. They have different things to navigate. And to some degree, the roster is built to compete now still. And it does not appear that they're going to fully tear this down and go through another rebuild. With that in mind, I think you need to hire someone who is at least experienced in terms of how to manage a roster, how to manage the ins and outs of it. And I don't think Louis Riddick is that. I think that there are options who are currently working in front offices with major roles who do that better. If Louis Riddick wants to come in as like the DPP or the assistant general manager, I'm fine with that. Generally, I'm not against Louis Riddick in the front office. I'm just against Louis Riddick calling every shot in the front office. I think that he needs to be in a supporting role as opposed to being the guy, the head of the entire organization kind of thing.
I 1,000,000% agree.
Yep. Coach, we'll give you a chance to do that, and then I see you're driving, so we'll get you in and out. So you get your opinion on the firing, and then Riddick and who you want.
I'm not 100% against Riddick. I'm not 100% knowledgeable as to his past experiences of if he's ever worked for a team or any of that stuff. I'm pretty sure he hasn't worked for a team. I'm not sure.
He worked for, I believe, the Eagles, if I remember correctly.
He was most recently the DPP of the Eagles from 2010 to 2013.
Okay. Well, they were kind of successful then. I wouldn't be objected to it. I'm not 100% in on it, but I would like to have a guy with experience who's been around for a while, who knows what they're looking for if they decide to replace McDaniel, which I'm not 100% sure they're going that route. It kind of sounds to me like the new GM's going to come in, be able to pick his guy, quarterback and coach. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if I would go Louis Riddick. Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure. I could go either way on that one.
Okay.
Coach, before we get you out of here, how do you feel about the firing of Chris Grier?
Oh, I feel great, man. Oh, man. It's like the best day we've had all year. I mean, the guy's been around since 2020 or the year 2000, the last time we won a playoff game. He's a part of this mess. He ends up being the general manager. I mean, he had one good year since 2016. I mean, yeah, get him out of here. Go. Get him out. Get him out.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Coach. We'll get you when you're not driving sometime. Come back in and talk some football, okay?
All right, brothers. Have a nice weekend. Happy Halloween.
Yes, sir. Happy Halloween.
Fins up.
Fins up, baby.
And to go with what he was talking about, I was going to bring this up. The elephant in the room for a lot of people will be Mike McDaniel and Tua and their situation. To preface, whatever the new GM wants to do, they get full autonomy. Part of me thinks, the more I think about it, the more you hear out there, because there's the tea leaves coming out saying, Tua's injury history is holding Mike McDaniel back. And, part of me is like, I think we're leaning towards it being Mike McDaniel with a new quarterback. Part of me thinks, Tua's cap hit is fairly or unfairly to him. Because let's be clear, when Tua's healthy, he's a top 10 quarterback. The issue is he's not healthy most of the time. And another note, I don't think he looks right now anyway. But I could see it going a couple ways. I will say this. I do not think if Ross comes out and says you got to give these guys 1 year to see if you can make it work, even if it's cap reasons, I don't think it'll be a deterrent. Some people will be. Mr. S had a tweet out earlier and mentioned the Joe Philbin situation and how we ended up with Dennis Hickey, and you had all these people turning us down. It's different in that Joe Philbin was not very well liked as a head coach in the league. And the thing there was, that the GM had no autonomy over Joe Philbin, and that's what hurt us. They basically were in to draft, and that would be a deterrent. There's only 32 teams in the NFL, and for whatever opinion people have on Stephen Ross, he basically gives you a blank check and says, do what you think is best. I'm not getting involved. If Stephen Ross got involved, we would have Lamar Jackson as our quarterback, because it's been very reported that is someone he really, really liked, really wanted. And he deferred to Chris Grier, and I believe Adam Gase was the coach at the time. So he deferred to them. I don't think that'll be an issue, but where do you guys think you stand on the Tua and McDaniel situation? Well, Kev, you already said you think that McDaniel's gone at the end of the year. I think we're going to give him a chance.
I don't think he's gone at the end of the year. I just think in general, my firm belief on all of this, and it's the case whenever you fire either general manager or head coach, is you should let the next person make that decision. And if it's very much like you hire, and I think the issue that people have is that when you go into an interview and you go, well, you have to keep the head coach.
Yep.
Suddenly that goes, well, then I don't get to make my decisions. I have to make my decisions based on someone else. And so I would rather be in a position where you hire a general manager independent of Mike McDaniel, let's be clear, and you let them make that decision. If they think Mike McDaniel is the right coach, if they think Tua is the right quarterback to lead them in the future, then that's their decision. That's their autonomy as general manager, as overseer of football operations, whatever. The issue comes is that when you go, well, you have to keep these two, then you have to keep Champ Kelly, because at that point, there's no one else who's going to make that decision, right? Like, general managers want control. That's what they're interviewing for. They want to run things. They don't want to be handcuffed to a head coach that they don't necessarily agree with. They don't want to be handcuffed to a quarterback they don't necessarily agree with. That's why the Titans are in this situation right now where they had to fire their head coach mid-season, and we don't know what their future looks like because the general manager came in and he got told you have to work with Callahan. Well, why? Why should that ever be a thing? Like, if the next guy comes in and goes, you know what, I really like Mike McDaniel, I think there are holes in this roster, I think we can improve this roster, fine. That's your decision. Put your stake on that and build around that. My issue is when you go, well, we're hiring someone, but he has to work with McDaniel. McDaniel's not that good. The truth is, McDaniel is not the greatest coach of all time. Even if you think he is a good coach, he hasn't earned that respect. He hasn't earned that respect of like being able to stay regardless of who the general manager is. He's not that good. And so whether you think he's a good coach or not, I think we all have different opinions, or we all have different thoughts in that. The truth is, general managers should get to make that decision because that's their job. And then if they want to sign up for the Mike McDaniel experience again, go ahead, do that. But you should be able to make that decision, not Stephen Ross.
Yeah,
Kev,
to be clear,
if you can decide, Kev, between and take cap ramifications out of it. If I'm telling you that you can either have Tua with a new head coach next year or Mike McDaniel with a new quarterback next year, which route are you taking?
Damn. I would say generally new quarterback, because I think that there are things that Mike McDaniel wants to do on offense that he is just unable to do because Tua is limited as a quarterback. And that is not me saying Tua is bad, because I think those two things get confused at times. It's me saying that Tua is not a perfect quarterback and he is severely limited in certain areas. And I think that limits what you can do on offense. And so if I had to pick those two things, I would kind of go twofold, and I would go, Mike McDaniel, you can stay. You have to hire someone to manage the clock. You have to hire someone to help manage the offense. You don't get to make these decisions anymore because we've seen what's gotten you when you've been able to make those decisions. I don't think it's a bad idea to keep Mike McDaniel. I just think in general, if you're going to keep Mike McDaniel, there has to be guardrails in place. He has to have an offensive coordinator that isn't necessarily calling plays, but is going to be a little bit more experienced. He has to have a change elsewhere because it's whatever's working isn't working. But I would generally go McDaniel, new quarterback, then new head coach Tua.
Yeah, and Jordan, before you get in, because I want to hear your opinions too. To be clear, I am not saying we're forcing anything. I just think I think the question will be to any GM candidate: can you make it work with Mike? Can you make it work with Tua? Is it one or the other? Is it neither? And you can't, like you said, Kev, you cannot have restrictions. It is 100% up to whoever the new guy is. I do think if you read the tea leaves online, there is in NFL circles a bit of a growing belief that Tua is also holding Mike McDaniel back. I don't fully believe that. Like, Tua does have limitations. I do love Tua. I'm a Dolphins fan first. So at the end of the day, I want what's best for the Dolphins. Tua is not the reason the wide receivers are not lining up properly 4 years into Mike McDaniel's tenure as a coach. But these are conversations that do have to wait till the end of the year as we see what goes and who we hire. Because it does sound like Champ Kelly's going to get a chance, but it doesn't sound like anybody really feels like he is the favorite. It does sound like he will probably be a part of the organization next year in some capacity, but I don't think he's going to be the GM. Jordan, this whole situation is fluid. It's also so complex because of contracts. Because one thing we got to credit Mike McDaniel is the team's still playing hard for him, but there's so many different things to go at it. So yeah, it's like, is it an unattainable situation like it was between the Denver Broncos and Russell Wilson, where it's just like you eat the giant cap hit and go from there? I don't think so, but it's all up to the new GM.
Yeah, I think it's part of what I talked about, where it's that the general manager that you feel has the best plan for the Miami Dolphins. And that plan may have to include Tua in the short term. That plan may include Mike McDaniel. But it's figuring out what the plan is that makes sense. I think, and I said it last night, I said it in Discord and I said it on Twitter, it's going to be
Which was
funny
a great tweet. Your thought, I think you're going. I wanted to compliment. That was a great comment you had last night.
It's going to be funny because the three of us in, what is it? It's 2025, in 2032, in 7 years. Okay. Mike McDaniel is going to be a successful head coach. And there's a chance Mike McDaniel's a successful head coach. And there's a chance Tua's a successful quarterback. I'm just not sure if either of those things can happen here. And if either of those things can happen at this time and with them together. So if that general manager candidate thinks that they can come in and work with the pieces that we currently have, but I think it's going to have to be a one or the other, which is why I asked you the question. I think it's going to have to be, we're hiring a new coach, and because of the way Tua's contract is set up, Tua is going to be in a battle with either a rookie or another veteran, or just get the starting job going into next year, and we're going to give it a 1-year trial basis with a new coach and him. Or it's going to be, like you said, with a Russell Wilson situation, where we're just going to kind of – and that situation worked out pretty damn well for the Broncos. And they're seemingly building something with that dead cat that they were sitting with. And it took a year, but it's tenable to do to start getting that shift. Football is very much a momentum sport. Football is very much a physicality sport. A team can be built even with having that 1 year of a cap hold. Do I think it's best case scenario? No. Do I think it's possible? Yes. But I think whether it's Mike and Tua, whether it's Mike, whether it's Tua, I think that's going to have to all be a part of the GM's plan. And it's not just, all right, we're getting rid of Tua. No, it's what is the plan to, in the smartest way possible, getting him off the books and moving on from him. What if we're getting rid of Mike, who is the name out there that we feel is a certified upgrade? Who is the guy that's coming in with a plan? Who is the guy that has an opportunity to work with the GM that we hire to put a product together? Because you can't just put a bunch of mishmash pieces together anymore. This organization from the top down has to become a cohesive unit, because that's what you see at the top of football. You see cohesive structural organizations that work all in a line together. And I don't know if we're relatively close to that here, which is why you're going to make a decision. Is it Mike? Is it Tua? That's all got to be part of that GM's plan when he sits down with Ross and company.
Yeah. I have not heard the Lane Kiffin stuff that
I think we need to stop listening to Colin Cowherd. Next question.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're not going to, like, until Mike is gone, this is basically, he's got to show if he's learned anything. And honestly, who knows? Because I have heard rumors, they are strictly rumors, so I don't know how true it is, that there have been prerequisites put on the coaches on who plays, who doesn't. We know that there were prerequisites when we hired Mike. You got to keep Josh Boyer. You got to keep Danny Crossman. Is there that for players? I don't know.
Great decisions those were, let's be clear.
They were great decisions, let me tell you.
While we're talking about assistant coaches, can we stop for a second? Brett, I know we weren't going to talk about the game. Can we talk about for a second that god-awful, horrible, horrendous personal foul call on Ollie Gordon? That was one of the worst calls I've seen all year, for him to come to the sidelines and get chewed out by Eric Studsville.
I'm still pretty sure Eric Studsville called him an MFer, which, like, come on, man. Can we be adults on the sideline of a football team?
Honestly, and I'll never next day overreact. That's borderline fireable for.
No, I said I'd have fired Studsville on the spot because of that. Because it's clear Ollie fell. Like,
yes,
whatever. It's not his.
Yes,
but my issue with that is, even if you don't think it, and I get it, football's fast, you don't see that. There's a better time and place to talk about that, and a better way to do it than as he's coming off the sideline and you see he's upset and you call him an MFer. Like,
let's talk about last week. I don't know if either of you, I had it on the quad box. Kyle Hamilton. I think it was Kyle Hamilton, or one of the Ravens secondary players against the Bears, made a bonehead play. It was a personal foul. He messed up. He ran to the sideline. John Harbaugh hugged the player, and I think it was Kyle Hamilton, said, "You made a mistake. Life moves on. Give me a hug." And the guy gave him a hug and moved on. But sometimes in football, like, there are times to call a guy an MFer, but there are also times when you just say, you know what, give me a hug. Life moves on.
Yep. But, like, it's also the way that, like, if you want to choose someone out, either you do it in the locker room or you go away from the middle of the sideline right as the guy's coming off, where national TV cameras are pointing right at you. You go to one of the benches and you just talk about it like an adult. Because
and here's the craziest. Look, I know nothing, but how about you watch the fucking play first?
Well,
how about you watch the play and see that your player slipped? And that was all that happened.
It's just like the way of going about that, and we can just end this conversation here. It's wrong completely, and it shows that no one has control of anything right now.
Yeah.
And that's where my general issue is that when players are chewing out coaches, when coaches are chewing out players in that manner, it's clear that no one has any clue where the frustration is coming from. It's like, it's just yelling to yell. It's like when Jonathan Gannon, like, started to, like, basically, I hate the word that they shoved Amari DeMarcado, but it's like, there's ways to go about handling conflict on a football sideline. And the way to do it is not as he's coming off, because Studsville, truthfully, should know that cameras are likely to either be pointed or potentially being pointed in that direction. He should know how to handle his emotions. It's his job to handle his emotions. And if he can't do that, man, it's time to go, because it's like, it's already a frustrating situation. You blew a 4th and 1 earlier in the game. You have that on a big play. Like, we know that there's frustration in place. You don't have to make it worse by yelling at him. And then you see Ollie Gordon react because he's frustrated. It's a bad situation across the board. It's not a good look for a football team who has 2 wins on the year to be chewing each other out like that, because that just shows that no one has any control of the situation. Like, that's the biggest issue with that for me. Is it's not that Studsville is mad. It's not that Ollie Gordon is mad. It's not that either side is frustrated. It's that either side is handling this wrong throughout, when the team has 2 wins and things are already bad. Like, you don't need to make bad things worse.
Kev, here's the biggest difference, okay? With the Amari DiMercato play, he made a huge bonehead mistake that directly led to the Tennessee Titans coming back and winning that football game, okay? Ollie Gordon didn't make a mistake. He just slipped on turf in a blowout loss that had nothing to do.
It's also the
anything.
First quarter. We're crashing out in the first quarter of a football game when it's like a 1-score game. Calm the fuck down, man.
You got, and now if you want to talk about crashing out, you have Mike McDaniel yelling at Larry Borum. That's warranted. Larry Borum made a bonehead false start, and McDaniel said, "Stay down." People said he called him a derogatory word. He said, "Stay down," and then said, "You cost us a touchdown." But that's one reason to freak out and say, you know what? It's 4th and 1. Why is our right tackle moving? Now, if you want to say if it was the Kansas City Chiefs, they wouldn't have been called for it. That's another thing. But Larry Borum had a false start on 4th and 1, which is unacceptable. But you know what the problem is? Larry Borum shouldn't be on our football team. Yeah. That's the problem. It's that Larry Borum has been a starting tackle all season. Oh, that's the problem.
They're still doing that. I can't believe we've done that all year.
Yeah, all year, every week, every single solitary week this season, Larry Borum has been a starting tackle on our football team.
I think I posted in the Discord. I was like, man, can you imagine if the Miami Dolphins decided that Larry Borum would solve all their backup right tackle problems, even when he was a bad offensive tackle in Chicago? Interesting.
3 of us sat here when we signed Larry Borum, and I'm pretty sure you can go back and find the tape. I'm pretty sure that we said, oh, Larry Borum's not that important to talk about. He's never going to start and is probably not even going to make the team. Yep. At worst, he's a replacement for Ike, which it turns out he has been a replacement because he's started every goddamn week.
Yep.
Close enough.
Cam Gordon with a good point here too. It's bad football teams. Emotions are high. And if you're not following Coach Cam Jordan, make sure you follow him on X. He's a good follow, very underrated follow too.
Oh yeah, he's great.
But just to wrap a bow on this with the coaching talking to I don't know how we got from all the way to that, but
let's go back to names. I want names
to be determined on the coaches.
Names, let's give them names.
We will revisit the quarterback and the head coaching position in December.
But Brett, I do want to say one more thing because I mean it's a little more reputable than Colin Cowherd. And it's a good point that Joe Shad tweeted out. Tom Pelissero was on the Rich Eisen show today and said that because of Tua's cap number and because of the difficulty of getting off of Tua's contract this offseason, that there's a chance that whoever the new GM is might opt to keep Mike McDaniel for 2026 and give Tua and Mike a trial run together so that when you are bringing in a new coach, either late 2026 or in 2027, then at that point, it's easier to make a move off of Tua and clear things out and give a new coach, and you possibly get a better new head coach because he's going to be able to pick his quarterback. Whether I agree with it or not, that's what Tom Pelissero said.
Well, again, the decision should be for the general manager, I think, regardless. If that's going to be the decision, let it be with the general manager in mind.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like I said, Cam Wolf was on the dive bar earlier. He thinks it's going to be they're going to clear it out. They're just waiting till the end of the year, and it sounds like everybody knew that it was unattainable with Chris Grier. But we will revisit Mike McDaniel. I want to say at the end of the year, but I have a feeling you get embarrassed in Madrid, he might be gone in the. I know right now they said he's
Spain. They might leave him in Spain.
They might leave him in Spain. If we get embarrassed again, because if it's like it's unattainable with him too, they'll make a move. And the last time Stephen Ross fired a coach in season, it was during an international game. This time we were in London. But we'll move on to potential GM candidates, which we've done before, but we can go in a little bit more detail on people. I see Kev's excited for it. A name I don't think we mentioned. Well, first of all, let's say Champ Kelly. I know people have their questions. His resume doesn't look the best right away. He's with the Raiders and the Bears, but I know he's highly respected. I have a feeling he was brought in. I know Alf.
Champ Kelly will get an interview.
Yeah, he'll get an interview. Alf,
but are the next 10 weeks his interview?
Yes, he might get a. He'll get.
Regardless, he'll get an official interview.
But I think that the difference between his interview and others' interview is his interview is going to be reflective. His interview is going to be taking, all right, what do you feel about what's happened the second half of the season? What can you do moving forward?
Yeah.
I think other guys are simply going to be on that other side of what can we do moving forward.
Yeah. Either way, what I was going to say is he is very well respected among the league. When you look at any article that says potential GM candidates, he is listed. I do not think he's going to be that. What I was going to say is Al from 3 Yards Per Carry retweeted something he said back when Kelly was hired, where it was writing on the wall for Chris Grier. And I do agree. I have heard that Kelly was hired because Ross wanted an outsider's perspective in there. Jordan, hats off. You did this earlier. You were talking about Thomas Dimitroff. Let's start with Thomas Dimitroff. So I'll let you take it because that's yours.
So obviously we know he was the general manager of the Atlanta Falcons for 12, 13 years. He was their general manager when they made the Super Bowl. And like I said, I think that the biggest problem that people will have with him is that his Atlanta team's kind of stalled out. But my kind of rebuttal to that is Dan Quinn, who was the head coach of that team, is doing a great job in his second start. And I think that organization and the way things went, I think everything stalled out after that Super Bowl loss to the Patriots. And I think everybody had to kind of go and do other things. He's currently a consultant with the Saints, which I think is a huge deal compared to a guy like Louis Riddick, who we talked about is out of football. And then like our producer just said there, Thomas Dimitroff and Paul Tudor Jones, who is a hedge fund manager, a billionaire, and his son created a football analytics company in 2022 called Sumer Sports, Sumer. It was a private company to focus on the analytics of football and helping people understand and do deep dives from an organizational standpoint on there. And Stephen Ross is a major investor in that company. And like is mentioned, they're a member of the same country club. So I think that if you're looking for a guy that is going to have connections to Stephen Ross and his family, a guy who is involved in the analytics, and I think a big thing is that he has already built a team as a general manager that has gone to the Super Bowl. I think he's got to be a name that you consider. And I don't think he's the prettiest name out there. I don't think he's the most exciting name out there. But I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, is there another candidate that we can talk about that was the general manager of a team that went to the Super Bowl, has an analytical background? Whether he has a connection to Ross or not doesn't matter. But I don't even think that there's a candidate there that even meets that criteria.
I don't believe so. And real quick, Kev, I'll let you go too. But something I wanted to throw out, talking about Dimitroff. And Tom Pelissero mentioned this, potentially bringing multiple people in to run the football side. Remember, what Stephen Ross, for lack of a better word, is an absentee owner. Like I said earlier, he gives you a blank check, says, have fun. But something he wanted to do when he came to Miami was he wanted a football czar. He wanted someone above, build out the organization, and let them build it. We saw it even though it was Wayne Huizenga who hired Bill Parcells. He comes in with that. Bill Parcells puts Jeff Ireland in place. Then, I don't know why he thought this was a good idea. He made Mike Tannenbaum the football czar, and then Chris Grier came in place. Dimitrov as a GM, I don't think it's a bad shout either, because like you said, it kind of fell apart at the end, but I think they misdiagnosed how big their window was, and the team just aged out, which happens. And unfortunately, sometimes you fall off a cliff. Father Time is undefeated. It's just how quick it happens. But what would you think of him as the football czar and have him put a GM in place?
Dimitrov?
Yep.
I think that's probably the way I would do it, is keep him as like the overseer of everything, whatever the title is for that. Every team has a different title, the president, I guess, of everything. Mm-hmm. And then give him the tools to hire an analytics guy, to hire a director of player personnel, a guy who can do some of those other things that not necessarily make it checks and balances, but give him options in place so that it's not just him making those decisions. I think Dimitrov is a fine hire in the sense that he at least gives you stabilization. He gives you a guy who understands what it takes to be a general manager. He's built successful teams like Jordan mentioned. It's not like he's a retread general manager in the sense that he's never done anything successful. It just didn't end well in Atlanta. And so I think that I kind of like him more as like the head of everything, and then you have other people in place to do some of the other stuff. That seems to be the new model for a lot of teams regardless. So I think that is something that they will explore. But I think that gives you a guy who understands what it is and what it requires to build a successful team. And then you put other people in place to help give him areas of expertise in this sense, and give him experts and analysts in place who understand smaller parts, whether that's Champ Kelly in a role, I don't know, but I think that's probably the best way forward if it's Dimitrov. I will say, I think there are plenty of people who may not be general managers right now who I would at least call, but Dimitrov would be worthy of an interview, especially because I think you want to know what someone who has general manager experience thinks of the roster and how to move forward.
Yep. And I will let you guys basically go off on candidates, because you guys, I know you both have a lot of names you want to talk about, and we've done it before. To me, you have to look at a team that's been great at drafting, and to me, three of the best drafting teams this decade, maybe longer, have been the Rams, the Ravens, and the Eagles. Alec Halaby is going to be a big name on everybody's list. I'll let you guys talk about him if you want. I keep going back. A name I really like is Ray Agnew, who is at Detroit right now as the assistant GM, but he came up under Les Snead with the Rams. And you see what they built in LA. You see how they, after not having draft picks for the longest time, what they built too. Yes, he's been gone since then, but see how they're building up Detroit too. I think he's the first name on my list. Jordan, I'll give you the floor to name your guys, and then I'll just sit back, grab a drink, and listen to Kev reel off about 20 names.
What are we drinking? Like, we fired Chris Grier. It's officially the afternoon on the West Coast, Grant. What are we drinking? It's Halloween, baby.
Yep.
No, but what I'll say first is a lot like when we were talking a couple weeks ago about the head coaching candidates. I want somebody, when we talked about Todd Monken and when we talked about Joe Brady, I didn't like for them as a head coaching candidate that their biggest success for Joe Brady came with that LSU team, and for Monken came with Lamar Jackson and that Georgia team. I want, like you're mentioning, Brett, for a guy that has maybe been able to do it without really the sum of all parts and the greatest of all time and guys like that. I want guys who have built. I want guys specifically that have built offensive lines, because I think that's going to be very important. I think that that's going to be something, just guessing, that Ross maybe hyper fixates on, guys that could do that. So you start talking about Agnew in Detroit. Okay. You start talking about Hallaby in Philly. You start, I know, and I'm gonna save kind of the deeper dives for Kev, but I know he's gonna mention Andy Weidel. Okay, because I think that's going to be a very popular name. You know, my top is Thomas Dimitrov, and then a guy like Ed Dodds, who in Indy they've put a lot of focus into the offensive line, and
Best
Chris Ballard
probably,
and Chris Ballard has kind of gone like this in his tenure there, and I know people have been sick of him, and you can say that Indy this year is doing this because of the motivation of losing their owner and all this, but Indy has been a team. When you start talking about a team that maybe doesn't have the flashiest guys, but they are consistent and a solid football team year in and year out, you start looking at Weidel, who's been in Philly and Pittsburgh. You start looking at Dodds, who's been in Indy for a long time. You look at Dimitrov, who was a GM who went to the Super Bowl. And then you want to look at the up-and-comer who you can maybe a young GM pair with a young coach in Mike McDaniel, bring some youthful energy in Alec Hallaby. But if it's Hallaby, I would like to see more of that Dimitrov head advisor figure that can kind of teach him the ins and outs of being a first-time GM. But like I said, there are a number of guys. So I'll give it one more time. Ed Dodds, Alec Hallaby, Andy Weidel, Ray Agnew, and Thomas Dimitrov. And I'm going to do what Brett did and get myself a little drink, and I'll let Kevin go because we're partying here.
Yep.
Yeah, Hallaby's going to be the most popular name for good reason. He's considered.
Okay, I'm going to keep my head back in. Talk about Hallaby a little more. Is he, because he's a young guy, is that the direction we want to go with this?
I think that's where the self-scout comes into play. You have to understand what this future looks like, and you have to be clear about what you want out of a general manager. I think Alec Hallaby's ready to take that next step. I think what the Eagles have done in terms of rebuilding that roster, keeping that roster competitive despite having to pay a quarterback, despite having to pay multiple players, their ability to evaluate their own roster and decide where they need to make upgrades. My major concern is I think that they have made some bad decisions in the past, especially with some of their free agent signings. You look at that secondary is not built to compete. That secondary has a lot of holes, but I think where I like Hallaby a lot, and maybe I don't know if it's him, I don't know if it's Howie Roseman, it's the Eagles' ability to find quote-unquote diamonds in the roughs later on in drafts, undrafted free agents. You look at a guy like Reed Blankenship, who I believe was a UDFA or a really late draft pick, who has emerged as a starting safety and a good starting safety for an NFL team. You look at Jalix Hunt, who's now a dynamic pass rusher for that Eagles defensive line, and he was a converted safety out of Cornell or out of one of these smaller, I think it was Houston Christian actually, but like you look at these rosters, it's like I like what they've done in terms of finding ways to build within the margins and build within the gaps. I think that's something the Dolphins have to consider. I think especially when you look at that roster, that's something you have to truly consider about everything. Ed Dodds is going to be the most popular name because you look at what the Colts are doing. He's been a respectable name since the Legion of Boom era when he was a major evaluator in what they did. I don't think it's a bad hire. I just think that maybe there may be more inspiring hires. I don't know. I think he's a good hire. I have some concerns about how they handled things from kind of the beginning of that Ballard tenure to now. I think that they found a momentum now, but it took them a while to get going. And I think that's my biggest concern with him is that truthfully, before this point with Daniel Jones and with Stan Scheichen and this current kind of situation that they have, that was not a very good roster. That didn't have a lot of talent. And so I'm just kind of concerned about that because how much has changed in terms of the way that he's evaluated, the way that that room has evaluated. One of my favorite names that gets mentioned is Mike Greenberg, not the ESPN host. We're not hiring an ESPN host here. Let's be clear. But Bucs assistant general manager, Mike Greenberg, because he's a cap guy and he was pretty crucial in how the Buccaneers managed the cap during the Tom Brady era and then immediately after the Tom Brady era. When they were in quote-unquote cap hell and they had to get creative, it was Greenberg, it was Licht, and it was John Spytek, who I believe is the general manager in Las Vegas now. Maybe wrong on that.
And sorry, Kev, I'm going to let you keep going, but I think Ozzy meant John Eric Sullivan, not Cunningham.
John Eric Sullivan is a really good name as well. He's been heavily involved in the scouting and the drafting side of things for the Green Bay Packers. I think the Green Bay Packers have had a lot of success doing that. He's worthy of an interview at the very least. I would even say
he's VP of player personnel, I believe.
Yes, I would say he's even worth a hire to some degree, because I think that's something that you can get in. A name that doesn't get mentioned a lot, and it's a name that I think doesn't get mentioned a lot because it's just kind of a boring name in a sense, is assistant general manager Mike Bradway with the Kansas City Chiefs. He was just promoted as the assistant general manager. He spent close to a decade under Andy Reid in scouting and drafting, heavily involved in that. His dad is former Jets general manager Terry Bradway, which I don't know if
he was with us for a while too, wasn't he, Terry Bradway?
He might have been. It feels like we've had a lot of guys who have just been with us because why not? Look, I get that Terry Bradway was not a good general manager. I understand that. But Mike Bradway has been important in terms of how the Chiefs have managed their cap space, how they've managed things behind the scenes to get to a point where now you look at that roster, they're still one of the best teams in football, even though they've had to build around certain players and they've had to manage the cap far differently than about 95% of teams because they're paying so much money to their quarterback. And they're paying a lot of money to a quarterback who is the best quarterback in football. So I don't blame them for that. But it is very difficult when you have to be in that situation. And then you had to manage the Chris Jones situation. The offensive line is rebuilt to some degree. I think that's an interesting name. One other name that continues to stand out to me when I did my research before this and then after Chris Grier's the announcement was made is Vice President of Player Acquisition for the Seattle Seahawks, Matt Berry. He has not been mentioned, I think, by anyone.
The fantasy football guy?
Unfortunately, it seems like everyone shares a name with
Louis Riddick, but we're going after Matthew Berry and Mike Greenberg.
Maybe we can hire Field Yates too. We'll just build the ESPN room. Matt Berry has been involved with the Seahawks and with college and with football for a long time. He worked with John Schneider. He worked with their current president. He does kind of a lot of everything in terms of player personnel or pro personnel, college scouting. He's been really involved in the Seahawks rebuilding this roster. And when I say rebuilding this roster, I mean going from Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll to last year when it was sort of this weird Mike McDonald, Geno Smith era, and then from the Geno Smith to the Sam Darnold era, and building around the quarterback. And I think that's an interesting thing for me because you look at what the Dolphins have to do, whether it's Tua or another quarterback, you have to build around the quarterback. This is going to be a situation where you have to build around a quarterback. And I think that the intriguing part about Matt Berry for me is he's worked in so many different areas of football personnel, pro personnel, college scouting. He has experience across the board. I think that experience could really help the Miami Dolphins because they're going to have to get creative in certain spots. And when you have to get creative in certain spots, I think the way you do it is by having someone who understands every side of the perspective in a sense. Another name that gets really popular is Ian Cunningham. I'm just going to generally avoid Ian Cunningham because I don't know if that Browns roster is that Bears roster is really good. And I would rather just not hire him if we're being truthful about everything. One other name that I'm just going to mention, and people are going to push back for a variety of reasons. One of them is not one that we will bring up on this podcast because it's going to create an entirely different discussion. Jordan, please don't break things while I'm talking. No,
you said you had a name that you didn't like, and I just immediately spilled something.
It's Browns assistant general manager Catherine Hickman. I understand. There are two reasons why that name will not be popular. One of them we will not bring up for a variety and multitude of reasons, because the last thing we need is this to turn into that kind of podcast. Yeah. But Hickman has been involved with the Browns decision-making for a long time. She's currently the assistant GM. She's been the vice president of football ops. She's been in a lot of different sides in terms of operations and scouting, but she's also been involved in decision-making for college or for Canadian Football League teams. She was involved with, I believe, the Montreal team and the Toronto Argonauts. And both those teams...
Did she sign Ricky Williams?
Maybe she did. If she signed Ricky Williams, hire her tomorrow. If she signed Ricky Williams, hire her tomorrow because I think that's the coolest thing ever. No, but I think that it's an interesting name in the sense that she has experience in a different football circumstance and a different way of having to build a roster and a different way of having to look at things. And I understand this Browns roster isn't very good. I understand this Browns roster has a lot of issues. I understand they're handcuffed to a certain contract for a certain man that we will not mention on this podcast. But I think that it's an interesting name in a sense to at least consider because of her experience, because of her multitude of experience, the way that she's been in certain roles. I think that's at least an intriguing hire or at least an intriguing interview for me because it's very interesting. One final name, because we mentioned the Rams, and the only name from the Rams that I would hire is Rams. I don't know his exact title. I believe he may be assistant general manager, vice president of football ops, John McKay. He's again a family. It's a kind of like a family affair there.
Rich McKay.
Yeah, Rich McKay. He's been involved with a lot of the Sean McVay scouting and player acquisition. If you're going to hire, I think, a combination from one team, which I don't necessarily think is the worst idea, the idea of John McKay and Chris Shula at least intrigues me. And it is a conversation that I would at least have because I think Chris Shula is doing a good job. And I think John McKay could really help them from a drafting standpoint to get to that next spot where they need to be. I'm going to say this, and then we can end this part of it. If anyone mentions Jim Nagy as a possible name, I am blocking them on Twitter. Jim Nagy is not going.
He's a friend of the podcast.
Jim Nagy may be a friend of the podcast. He should not
on
be
the podcast.
General.
His name is Jimmy because that's what his mother calls him.
Jim Nagy should not be the general manager of the Miami Dolphins next year.
I agree.
I think that's just probably where
and I think he would agree too.
Yeah. So while we were talking, I did pull up an article that came out today. It's by Wendell Ferreira of A to Z Sport. It's 15 names who could be GMs. I just want to go through the list of names. Some are people we already talked about. Yes or no for an interview from you guys. First name he lists as a potential GM, John Eric Sullivan, Vice President of Player Personnel for Green Bay.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. The next name, let me pull this up again. George Kokinis, the Baltimore Ravens Vice President of Player Personnel. I would say no to him, but that's just because I remember his time with the Browns.
Yeah, I'm going no.
Interview anyone with the Baltimore Ravens because of their track record.
Really, we have the rest of the season. We can interview anybody, period.
I still believe that there are rules within the NFL of when you can interview certain candidates. I don't know if you're allowed to interview them mid-season.
But what I'm saying is we have – look, there are formal interviews and then there are informal interviews.
Yeah, you can always interview the agent and get a general idea. Yeah, I don't think anyone's stopping you from interviewing the agent.
I don't think we're waiting till the end of the season to get down to our final couple candidates.
Yep. Next name, one that Kev brought up, Catherine Hickman, Vice President of Football Operations, Cleveland Browns.
Interview. I think you have to interview someone like that who has that experience.
Interview.
Okay. Andy Weidel, Pittsburgh Steelers assistant.
Interview.
Short list.
Okay. Ed Dodds, Indianapolis Colts assistant.
Short list.
This is a no for me. Brian Zanders, Jacksonville Jaguars senior advisor.
No. Because a position like senior advisor, now you're talking kind of in the path that Kev was talking about Dimitrov, that's the guy you're going to hire high and then put in a GM under. And I don't think that if we're going to do that, I'd rather just Dimitrov.
Sanders also has general manager experience, I believe, with the Denver Broncos or Baltimore Ravens or Tampa.
I think it was Tampa and Denver.
And I don't particularly remember those tenures being amazing. I think the Denver tenure was at least respectable.
He was only the general manager of Denver.
Did they make a Super Bowl during that time? When was he the general manager?
85% of the team's roster was overhauled in his first season.
He was GM 2009 to 2012. So that was he was Josh McDaniels.
He drafted the following players as GM: Von Miller, Chris Harris, Demaryius Thomas, Julius Thomas, Malik Jackson, Derek Wolfe, Danny Trevathan, Orlando
Tim Tebow.
Franklin, Eric Decker, Virgil Green, Parrish Cox, and Noshawn Moreno.
Suddenly, I'm a little bit interested in him.
Yeah.
He also he was there, although it was his last season when they signed Peyton Manning. He also, as free agent, signed Brian Dawkins, re-signed Champ Bailey, re-signed Elvis Dumerville, re-signed Brandon Marshall. He's also
absolutely not to interrupt you, Jordan. Absolutely not an Elliott Wolf. He's getting pushed out of New England for a reason.
They want him. I was on the LFG Pats podcast. They want him gone.
He's not even the general manager in New England anymore. He doesn't make decisions there.
No.
Okay, a name we didn't mention. I would look at him because he is a big Harbaugh guy, but Chad Alexander, the LA Chargers assistant GM.
Interview just because I want to see if you can bring Jesse Minter with him.
Brad, who was the name? I'm still cleaning up my mess over here.
Chad Alexander from the Chargers, assistant GM.
That was a name that Kev had mentioned the last time we were on, and I did a little more research. To me, he was a name I listed as kind of outside looking in. I would kick the tires around, but I'm not sure.
Okay, Alec Hallaby, Philly assistant GM. I think he's everybody's favorite.
Yeah. Short
list. Arguable favorite.
Hallaby with Dimitrov as kind of the vice president of football operations. That's a killer combination.
If you can tag team Hallaby with someone, I would be so down. It's not even.
Yes, absolutely.
Will McClay, Dallas Cowboys vice president of player personnel.
I won't pretend to know anything about it, just because you said Cowboys. No.
I just don't know how involved he is. And that's my biggest question mark is how involved is he in all of these decisions? Or is this just Jerry Jones being a senile old man?
Right. Brandon Brown, New York Giants assistant GM. He was with the Eagles before 2022. He's been with the Giants since 2022.
No.
I'd say no.
I know he's a respected football mind. I know that he is someone who, from my conversations with people, they do actually respect him as a football evaluator. It's sort of similar to like hiring Mike Kafka as your head coach, the Giants like quarterbacks OC coach. Why? You can hire someone who has a little bit more success in their organization.
I want to go back to what Ozzy said there, and while that's true, I want to go back to something I said earlier. We could talk about these guys all we want. We could talk about every single one of these solitary names, but until we know, and we won't know this, we'll never know this, but until we know what their plan is to fix the Miami Dolphins, there might be somebody that's more qualified to be the GM of the Miami Dolphins than there is to be the GM of, let's say, the Bears or the Titans or the Lions or the Jaguars. Okay. It's going to be which guy has the best plan to get us from where we are now to having a realistic shot to win a playoff game. And that may look different for each team. And that scenario may look different from each candidate. So it's really about figuring out which of these guys are going to be talked about. But then it's up to the guys to come up with the plan on what they want to do.
I think it's very similar to head coach searches, though, for fans, right? Like, you don't know everything about the head coach because you're not involved in an interview with the guy. Like, I think that a lot of things is determined based on how he comes in the interview, based on what his plan is, right? Like, Jordan, you mentioned it perfectly. We don't know the plan for these guys. And so we're just kind of going based off history and based off of what we know. And I think that's the case for almost all of this to some degree, is like, we don't know what his plan actually is. That's up to Stephen Ross and whoever is involved in hiring the next general manager. Just like I don't know every head coaching candidate perfectly because I don't know what their offense plans to look like. I don't know what their defense plans to look like. I don't know what their staff hires look like because I'm not in the room when they go, okay, this is who I'd hire as my staff. These are the guys who I've had conversations with and they would join me. I think it's all kind of a crapshoot, but I think the fun in it is it's a crapshoot by nature. And so you get to have fun discussions about what things would look like.
Absolutely.
Next name, I already know the answer for Kev, so I'm probably going to agree. Ian Cunningham, assistant GM for the Chicago Bears.
He's in the Chad Alexander bucket for me, where he's kind of on the outside looking in. There are just better candidates right now to look at. But he's a guy that I would be interested in hearing his plan.
Ray Agnew, defensive assistant GM, for the Detroit Lions.
Short list.
He's on my short list.
Short list. My only concern is he's a little older. I know he's like in his late 50s, and so I don't know how long. First of all, I don't know if he wants to be a general manager.
But so Dimitrov is 59.
Yes, but I just am a little bit concerned about first-time general manager who is older. I don't think that's like a check. I would interview him for sure. I just don't know if he's on my short list per se.
Yep. Mike Greenberg, assistant GM for the Tampa Bay Bucks. I'm sure
he's my favorite. He's my favorite.
Okay. Two more. You got John McKay, LA Rams assistant GM. I would definitely interview him. Anybody gets the Rams. And then the final one they list is actually our interim GM, Champ Kelly. He's going to get the interview. I don't know if he can be considered a favorite, just because I don't think anybody who's been in the organization can be considered a favorite.
I think you are doing yourself a disservice if you do not interview in-house first, especially when you have the opportunity to let interview in-house. Let's see what he has in mind. First question I would ask him is, what would you change? What would you do differently from the Chris Grier era? Because I think that would give you a very good idea on where they aligned and where maybe they don't align. Because the truth is, I think the other thing about this is every assistant general manager is not going to agree with the general manager on every decision. And so like the biggest question I would ask Champ Kelly or anyone else who gets the interview is, what would you have changed? Where would you have changed this offseason or last offseason to make this look different? Because I would love to hear what his answer was.
I agree.
Okay. And those are the lists. I think that's basically it. We've been on air for over an hour. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
This is a great day. I just want to remind everyone, this is an amazing day.
Great day. Not just because Chris Grier got fired, but it is Halloween weekend, so it is going to be a fun weekend.
Kev, what are you dressing up as tonight?
Tomorrow I'm going as Bobby Hill.
Okay.
That's a good one. But and you guys saw my Robin outfit, so that's what I got going. But yeah, it's a fun day. Everybody enjoy the rest of your Friday and be happy. Like I said, a dark cloud has lifted over the fan base. A dark cloud has lifted over the organization. It is, as Coach Cam Jordan says, it is basically Christmas.
You know what's funny on that note, Brett? It's basically Christmas. But when I woke up this morning and started to see the text coming in, I kind of thought it was April Fool's Day.
I got tagged by like 5 different people in like 5 different Discords and group chats, and I went, who's fucking with me the most right now? Brett, you tagged me, and I went, I swear to God, Brett, if you're messing with me today, I am going to be so upset.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't mess with that because I don't think this is something anybody can mess with. But yeah, thank you for joining us, everybody. We will be back later. We will talk about, Jordan and I will probably doing a recorded episode this weekend, previewing the trade deadline, because I don't think we're gonna have time to go live.
We'll figure it out.
Yep, and we'll go from there. But yeah, everybody enjoy your weekend. Happy Halloween, Merry Christmas. It is and Happy New Year, because it is a dawn. It is a new era for the Miami.
It is a new year. New year is a good comparison.
Yep, it is new. Just be excited until you realize we got to play football again. But be excited.
I will pretend to forget about that part of this for the next couple. We have about 10 days before I have to worry about that again. Yeah. So
have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye, guys.